Hey everybody, welcome back to Sam's Doing Stuff. What am I doing today? Well, I'm going to install a transfer switch. That's right. It's always a good idea to have a backup source of power in case of emergencies. So we're going to do this. Now, this is intended to be a DIY project, but if you are not comfortable working with electricity, I highly recommend hiring a licensed electrician to do this for you. I am not a licensed electrician, but I've done this before. So here we go. So here's everything it comes with. You have instructions in both Spanish and English. You have your panel. It is pre-wired. Some flexible conduit. They provide you with plenty of wire nuts. This is your inlet box. This is the cable that will go between your generator and your inlet box. And then you have a couple of connectors here, choice of 90 degree or straight. Okay, the first step you want to take is you want to head over to your panel in your house and you want to determine which circuits you want to power using your transfer switch and your generator. So talk to the wife and we determined which circuits we want to power, and then I labeled each one of them with the corresponding letters that are in the transfer switch. I'll go over them here real quick so you know what I chose. First of all, the first 220 in the transfer switch goes to this 220, which is going to be for our well pump. So we will have running water when the power goes out. Good. The second one is going to be for this 220, which powers this sub panel. Now the reason I'm doing that is because this sub panel has very light loads. It has a bunch of 15 amp breakers in it that power all the upstairs lights and outlets. We don't use those very much, and it's just for convenience. So we're never going to overload this circuit with this sub panel. Now, if you have a sub panel that has a bunch of high load appliances or something, I would not recommend doing this, but this is just for lights and outlets, and we're not going to overload that circuit, so we should be good. So that leaves us with 6 single pole 110 breakers, and we're going to do, well, I'll just read them off to you as follows. So we have 2 furnaces, so we got an upstairs furnace and a downstairs furnace. That's 2 circuits. We want to power our internet so my wife can continue to work and we can still get some entertainment and have information available. We want to, of course, power our refrigerator, our sump pump, and then just as kind of an extra, there's one left, so we're going to do our dining room and our foyer, just as convenience. Your next step is going to be determining where you want to mount the transfer switch. Now, I have a corner here that I have to work with. There's no room to the left of my panel, so I have to go to the right, and I'm going to have to come around this corner. So everything else is mounted on 3/4 inch OSB, and I happen to have a piece of 3/4 inch scrap plywood, so I'm going to mount that plywood to the wall. And what that allows you to do is to kind of temporarily hang your transfer switch with just a temp screw, so that while you're doing the wiring, it's not, just hanging there. If you just mount it to concrete, which you can, you have to be perfect because you can't move it around. Once it's on the concrete, it's there. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and use the full length of this flexible tube, determine where I want it to start from the box, and that'll give me just about the center of where the transfer switch will go. So that'll come out of there and just about here on the wall. We'll mark it. Now we will have a little bit of play to be able to, like I said, move that back and forth, but this gives me an idea where the center of my board can be, so that when I mount the transfer switch, I won't be going off of the board. It'll sit. There, now we got a nice surface to mount our transfer switch to, and I made sure that I mounted this piece of wood below where the service to the house is, because the wiring is going to go in underneath this service, So it's got a, the transfer switch is going to be about here. This all up here is just extra. So now we're coming to a step that might not be typical. I want to use this transfer switch first with our gas generator, but eventually I want to get rid of the use of our gas generator, and the gas generator will be a backup to our backup, and I will be using battery power, a battery generator, if you will, to power my transfer switch. So they give you this inlet, okay, and you have to provide the wire to go from your transfer switch to your inlet. Now this is leftover wire that I've had, and I used this wire actually to do the old transfer switch. This is a number 8 3-wire, and I've got plenty of it to use here, but I don't have to, because you can simply take this panel off right here. Then you can take this apart and you can remove the 4-pronged inlet and mount it right here on your transfer switch. So if you're going to use this for an indoor application, which like I said, we want to eventually switch to battery backup, I'll just mount this inlet directly into the transfer switch. We're going to start by removing the screws that hold this panel in place. Make sure you keep each screw with each side and remember where they go. Now inside this box you're going to have a black wire, a red wire, and a white wire. Now you're going to take apart your inlet. Remove the front plate. I'm going to use an 11/32 socket, and you're going to take this little screw right here out, or this little nut off of there. That's going to give you your ground wire right there. Pull the ground out. Now we're going to take the inlet out. Pop this open. You're going to just remove these 3 Phillips head screws. Take your inlet apart. And you're simply going to reinstall that into the front plate. Except they don't give you the right size screws. So here's what I ran into. The screws that came out of the inlet box, those 3 holes are right there, fit those 3 holes. But then the holes on the front panel are drilled too big. See that? They're drilled just a little bit too big, so these don't fit. So if you're doing what I'm doing, you may have to go to the hardware store. I just happen to have nuts that were small enough to fit these little screws. So now I'm going to take these tiny little nuts that I found and thread them on the screws from the back. Okay, that was fun. So if they'd simply drilled the holes in this front plate the same size as they did on the inlet cover, that would have been a lot easier. So anyway, now I have my inlet mounted right on the front plate. So all I have to do now is wire this in. Okay, so I'm going to remove the green grounding screw here. Oh, don't tell me that's too big. That looks too big. That screw, well, we're going to make it go. We're going to make it. Oh, this is a lot of fun. Guys, this is a lot of fun. Part of the problem is they made that. It's the same company that makes all this. They should make it all work together. Nice and tight. Okay. Guys, that's extremely frustrating. Yeah, extremely frustrating. But I got it together. So the ground wire from the inlet, the back of the inlet, is tied into where the ground wire is on the inside. That's good. All right, now we got a W, a Y, an X, and a G. The G is obviously the ground wire. The W is the white. Good and snug. Got a pull test. Okay, white wire is in where W goes. Red goes into X. tight. We'll check. And then black goes into Y. Okay, there it is. Once again, the only difference from doing it this way to using this inlet box is you would use a bit of wire, you know, 3-wire like I told you before. They recommend 10 gauge, this is 8 gauge, but you would just be wire nutting this onto that wire and then using that wire as basically an extension cord that would connect to this. Now you might want to be tempted to go ahead and put this back on, but don't do it yet. Okay, well, wiring that was a lot more fun than I wanted it to be. Note the sarcasm. Anyway, so now we got it all wired in there, and like I say, don't put this panel back on yet because there's a couple of screw holes in here for mounting. So we're going to kind of get this thing about the right height where we want it. And I'm going to try and line this box up with the bottom of the main panel. We're going to put a temporary screw in the top. I'm going to mark that where the temporary screw will go. And because I'm me, I'm just going to double check that that's the center. Just drilling a little pilot hole. I'm using little short stubby wood screws. It's just what you need. Remember, our plywood's only 3/4 inch thick. Just like that. All right, so this obviously swings a little bit. We're just trying to make sure that everything's in the right place. I'm gonna kind of just tuck this up in here. It'll just hang, I think. Yeah, like that. Now, I'm concentrating on the bottom part where the big old tail of wires comes out. Okay, so we've got a 90-degree connector in the bottom, and I had to turn it around so it's facing the correct way toward our house panel. And we just want to make sure that I measured correctly, so we're going to take our conduit here and line it up from where I want it to go into the panel. And yeah, it's pretty darn close to perfect. All right, good. So now we know that we did everything correctly. Now we can go ahead and we can mount this thing a little more permanent-like. It should be perfect, right? Right. All right, we're gonna drill some pilot holes. There we go. Good, that ain't going anywhere. Okay, now we're all wired and we're mounted to the wall. I'm going to double check my wiring. And that's why. Because the ground broke. So I'm going to have to redo that. Oh boy. And then tighten it back up before it goes anywhere. Good and tight. A little pull check. Okay. That's why you always got to check things. Check that ground wire because it broke off. Okay, now that's good, right? Yes, everything is wired securely. Now I can put this back together. Sure that's nice and tight. Okay, and there's our inlet. Now I'm expecting this next step to be loads of fun. So now you gotta take your little piece of somewhat flexible conduit and you gotta feed all of this wire through this conduit. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to just take our nippers here because we don't want to damage this wire, and we're going to very carefully nip this zip tie. Now I'm going to gently all right, now that it's all straightened out, I'm going to take some electrical tape and I'm going to wrap these ends because I have a feeling that when I try to feed it through that corrugated corrugated conduit, it's not going to be too friendly. That's probably good. All right, nice. Now, make sure you don't lose these there's rubber ends in the, see those red things? They're little plastic, they're not rubber. Plastic ends, so you're gonna feed this all the way through that. Oh, look how nice and easy that is now. Look at that. Just so easy. Yeah, that was a smart idea. Come on. I said it too soon. Sure is easier than if they were all just hanging out. Yeah, there we go. All right, we're gonna get this all the way back to here. Now, they give you the bottom plate to this 90-degree angle in a separate bag. I thought they shorted me, but I found it, so. Anywho, we're going to put this 90-degree on here and hold that in place. We'll get that tightened up. All right. Now you're going to take your other 90 and take your big old rat tail here and feed the whole thing through. Right down to here. You don't have to tighten that down all the way yet. It's just kind of in place. And that should line up with right about where you want it to go in the box. Yep, we're still good. Okay. So the next thing you need to do, and this is why we put the tape on these, is we need to remove the front panel. So I would say turn the main power off to your house right here first before you take this panel off. I'm not going to do that right now because the house is being used. I can't turn the power off. But I'm just going to get this next step done, and then tomorrow we're going to turn the power off when nobody's here, and we'll get to the next wiring phase. A lot of people don't know that you need a square drive when you're doing electrical work. I don't like square drive, but all this electrical crap uses it. If you keep pressure on your panel, when you take this last screw out, the panel should sit over the breakers, and it won't fall off. Then you can just take the whole thing and lift it off. Just like that. So now that you remove the front panel from your service, always remember, these are always hot. These big wires coming in, they are always hot. Even when the main panel is turned off, the wires coming in will kill you. Don't touch them. Now we need to pop out the breakout for the hole that we're going to feed all this wire through. Make sure you double check the size of the hole you want to pop out because there's multiple rings for different size fittings. So make sure you pop out the right size. Try and be as neat as you can. And do not let this wire touch anything up in there. All right, we are in. Get that on here somehow. There we go. All right, now we're cooking. I don't want to say we're cooking while we're working with electricity. Okay. Good. Good and snug. There we go. That's in. Okay, next step is going to be turning the power off. Okay, it's the next day. So like I said, the next thing to do is turn the power off. There's nobody else in the house except for me and the cats. So here we go. Now when you do that, I've got camera lighting here, battery powered camera lighting, so I'll be able to see. Make sure you have lighting so you can see what you're doing. I have removed the tape from my bundle of wires here, and the next thing I want to do is I'm going to connect my ground, which is the green, and my neutral, which is the white, into the neutral bar. Now, on a main panel, the ground and the neutral are bonded with a green screw. So it's okay to just connect these both into the same bar. There's no separate ground bar and neutral bar. So we're going to measure these out, cut each one to length, strip the end, and screw it into our bar. I want to remind you once again, this up here is still hot. Do not touch anything up here if you're doing this. It'll kill you. So you just run your wire nice and neatly up along the sides. We want to make it look as neat as possible. Bend it at a 90. Measure out how much you're going to need. Pinch the wire right there. Cut the wire right there where your fingers are. And you're going to strip it. Twist the end just to make sure it stays nice and neat. I'll loosen the next screw above it. You got plenty of room to feed the wire in. And like I did before, just run that wire nice and neat. Put it in behind the screw. Hold it in place. And tighten your screw. And that's it for that. All right. Now your neutral and ground are done. We're going to move on to the breakers. Every one of these is exactly the same, so I'm going to show you one, and then you just repeat the process for all the rest of them. Now, we labeled these A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, so it's pretty much a no-brainer now because all of these black and red wires are labeled A through J, okay? The red wire, and you can separate all these out if you want. Might help to have them separated. Anyway, there we go. Your red wire is going to connect directly to your breaker, and I'll show you that in a second. The black wire with the corresponding letter is going to connect to the wire that you take out of the breaker. This is how you do it. So now I shut all the breakers off that I'm going to use. Next, we're going to unscrew A. Take your wire out and just push it off to the side for now. Now you're going to find the A wire in your bundle of reds. There's the A. Once again, try and do this neatly. So we're going to take the wire that's labeled A, we're going to bring it up here along the side, measure over to where you need it to be, pinch it. Cut your wire. Strip your wire. Just give it a little twist just to make sure it stays neat. We're going to take this and we're going to put it right in here where that black wire is that we took out. Now we're going to tighten that back down. Now you want to find the A wire in the black grouping. So the black A wire. Found the A wire. Same procedure. Nice and neatly go up the edge here. And this is going to wire nut to the wire that you took out of the breaker. So this one here that you took out earlier, you're going to wire nut this together. Cut your wire. Strip it. And you're going to wire nut the two together. Now once you're done wire nutting that together, tuck it back in where it's nice and safe and out of the way. And that's basically it. So I'm going to continue doing that B all the way through J, and I'll check back with you when I'm done. All right, I'm down to my final circuit, so I'm going to go over it one more time just so you can see very clearly how this is done. So J is my last circuit. I'm going to go here next to the breaker on this side, and I'm going to loosen this screw just enough. Then I'm going to pull the wire out of the breaker, and we're just going to bend it out to the side so it's out of the way. Next, we find the red wire that corresponds with that letter, J, and they are labeled. So this is J. It's also my last wire, so I know it's J, but I'm going to double check it anyway. So now we're going to measure it, just run it neatly up the side and over at a right angle to the breaker. And then you know how far to cut it. Cut your wire, strip the end, and give it a little twist, and insert the red wire where you took the other wire out. Then we're going to tighten that screw. Nice and snug. Always give it a little pull check here just to make sure it's in there good. All right, now your last black wire, which on the side of it, it says J. It's going to do the same thing up this side, right even with where the wire that you removed from that circuit breaker. And that's where you're going to cut that one. Cut your wire, strip it, give it a little twist, and then you're going to wire nut that to the wire that came out of the breaker. Nice and tight. I like to really give those a good, and then give it a pull check, make sure they're good and snug. Then you're going to take that wire and just tuck it neatly like I did with these other ones out of the way. And that's it. We're done. Now, just want to kind of go over the flow of electricity here so you know what all of this is doing. So you've got your power coming in, then that power goes to a breaker. Let's pick, I don't know, the last one we just did, J, okay? Power going through that breaker goes into the red wire that comes from the transfer switch. So it's going to go through the transfer switch. When the transfer switch is set to line, that power will just go straight back through the black wire and connect to the circuit. And that circuit then goes through the house. When you have a power outage and you come down here and this is turned off, you're going to switch, well, you're going to plug everything in and start your generator up. So everything's hooked up and you start your generator. Then you're going to switch this over to generator. It's very clearly marked. You switch them all over to generator. Now the power is coming from the generator into the transfer switch and going straight to that circuit that you just hooked up over here with your twist ties with your wire nuts. I'm sorry, I'm losing my mind. There's a lot to think about. Anyway, yeah, goes straight through the black wire that you connected with a wire nut to your circuit. So you're powering those circuits without any of this, without these breakers or anything. It's going directly to those circuits. All that's left now is to put the panel back on and turn the power back on. Our procedure for turning the power back on is we're going to make sure all of our breakers in our transfer switch are on. They're all up, so they're all on. We're going to set every one of them to line. That allows, like I said before, the power to come through the panel, through this, and then back to our circuits. So we're powering it from the grid. Now we're ready to turn the power on at the panel. As a precaution, I'm going to leave all of my breakers that I have run through the transfer switch off, turn the main power back on, and then turn each one individually on to make sure there's no issues. Good. Good. There we go. Everything's working. Now all we have to do is wait for the power to go out. Hey, I appreciate you coming by. I hope you learned something from this. It was good for me to go through this and do this again myself. I kind of learned some things that I had forgotten from the last time I did it. So it was a bit of a struggle to kind of go over some of the things that were not so good. Plugging your inlet or connecting your inlet onto the box here. The screws don't match, so I had to find those really small nuts to make that work. The ground broke off, if you remember in there. I had to re-strip that wire and reconnect it again, so that was a bit of a frustration. But the rest of it went perfectly well. So I appreciate you stopping by. Like I say, I hope you learned something. If you did, please give me a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you like seeing stuff like this. We do all kinds of home improvement and outdoor stuff, and who knows what next I'll be doing. So anyway, I will see you next time when I am doing more stuff.